Order. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Senator Pavlo.
Here.
Senator Emmett.
Here.
Senator Colbeck. Here. Senator Hopgood.
Here.
Senator Young.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 members present.
Okay, with the K-12 subcommittee call to order. Clerk, please take the roll. You guys want to check in? Senator Walker?
Yep. The Senate Appropriations Subcommittee for K-12 and Education will come to order. Can the clerk call the rolls, please?
Senator Walker.
Present.
Senator Castro. Senator Papageorge. Senator Hopgood. Here. Mr. Chair, you have 4 members present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll of House Education Committee members?
Madam Chair,
Here.
Representative France, Crawford, Daly, Tedeschi, Lund, McMillan, Hooker, Jacobson, Price, Young, Lipton,
Here.
Brink, here, Stallworth, Lamonte, here, Abed.
Thank you. Chair Rogers.
Appropriations Subcommittee on the Department of Education. Can we take the roll, please?
Chairman Rogers,
Here.
Representative Cotman,
Present.
Lori,
Here.
Walsh, Dillon, Brown.
Here.
Chairman Rogers,
Here.
Representative Lori,
Here.
Cotman,
Present.
Walsh, Singh, Dempsey.
Thank you. Is there a motion to excuse absent members of House Education? So moved by Representative Hooker. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today is the second meeting of this Joint Education Committee to discuss the report on the options for a state assessment. And we're going to get started right away. And our first speaker today will be Dr. Richard Zeal. He's a member of the State Board of Education. And I think at some point Eileen Weiser, another member of the State Board, will be here as well.
Well, good afternoon. It's a great honor to speak for you today on behalf of the State Board of Education. I'm Dr. Richard Zeile, and that's German. German has a rule that when 2 vowels go walking, the second one does the talking. And so I have the honor to represent the board as a whole and speak on behalf of the MDE's recommendation. We've been very concerned on the matter of testing and the transition to the testing based on the new Common Core standards. This has been in the works for several years, and the MDE has made great efforts to try to meet the requests of the legislative committees in terms of request for bids and answering their questions. And without going into details, I'll simply open myself up to questions on behalf of the committee.
Thank you. Representative McMillan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Dr. Zeile. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your extended testimony. If the state of Michigan, State Board of Ed, doesn't like parts of the test, what's the process for changing parts of the test that we disagree with, whether it's The geometry is suggested that it's probably not as good as other geometry or, some other math or English. What if we disagree? What's the process, and do we have the authority to make those changes?
The short answer is yes. The Smarter Balance Consortium, in which we have been a key leading state with a number of representatives in the organization, develops a bank of, to simplify, let me call it a bank of questions. And each question tests a topic or an item that might be part of curriculum. So you choose from the bank of items that goes into your computerized test. And so in that way, the states can modify the curriculum and, if necessary, add topics such as cursive writing or something of that nature, which is not part of the Common Core but left to the states.
But if we don't like the questions in the bank, then we are out of luck. And I'm glad that you've tied curriculum, because
Sure.
that was my next question, was testing does drive curriculum. We heard during the Common Core that, hey, we're not talking curriculum, now we are. When we're talking testing, we're talking curriculum because they teach to the test. So I appreciate the tie-in there. But the fact is, if we don't like the test bank, then we're out of luck. So I don't think we can, if we don't like a certain direction or certain area, I don't think we have. One last question, unless I get to come back. How in the world, this was sold to us that we can compare to other states nationally, but we know that at least for 3 years, and probably more, there's going to be an option for paper and pencil. So how in the world do you compare a computer adaptive, the kids taking computer adaptive tests that changes the question depending on how they answer the previous question, to a test that is not computer adaptive, that's pencil and paper? This thing that we were sold that it was actually going to be comparative, I mean, we have the NAEP already, we've had it for 30 years or whatever, so that's comparative. This isn't comparative, is it? I mean, there's going to be very distinct problems, especially in areas that, all this high stakes that we're putting on this potentially. It's not comparative nationally, is it? Or even statewide?
It will be more comparative nationally because it will be based on criteria accepted by 45 to 47 states. Let me just backtrack. You mentioned teaching to the test, and any school, any teacher that teaches to the test is betraying the fact that he or she does not know his or her business. Because you don't teach to the test, you teach the subject. You see, teaching education is more like lighting a fire than it is painting a wall. And we know this from my own experience with Lutheran schools, which never adopted the Michigan Curriculum Framework, but our students did pretty darn good when taking the MEP tests. So teaching to the test is often a formula for failure, and you'll see that that characterizes many of our lowest performing school districts. The other matter that you asked, how can the computer adaptive test be compared with the pencil and paper test? Well, that's the beauty of computer adaptation. I'm pretty cynical about the claims made for technology and education, but one of the few real gains in technology is computer adaptive testing. I was administering this 20 years ago in a small parochial school in Detroit, and we're just now talking about Michigan Public Schools taking this on, and some are saying they're not ready. It's an example of how the private sector, I think, is more responsive to changes in the field and simple economies than many large public institutions. Now, computer adaptive testing works this way. In your standard test, you got 100 questions, and the average student will get the first 50 right and the last 50 wrong. And the first 25 are so easy, it's a waste of time, and the last 50 are so boring or so difficult or so challenging that that it's going to get them all wrong anyway. So computer adaptive testing asks the student a question in the middle difficulty, and then if he gets it right, then he goes on to a harder one. If he gets it wrong, gets to an earlier one, and then gives the student the 20 or so questions that focus on his level of achievement or level of mastery rather than giving all 100 questions.
I understand that. I mean, I asked a simple question. They're obviously taking different tests, so they're not comparable. They're different tests, completely different. They're not comparable. That's all I asked.
Well, that's like
Right.
saying you measured with a ruler and I measured with a wooden ruler and I measured with a
Okay, so
plastic
completely
ruler.
different
and
tests
they're
can
different
be
rulers, but
comparable.
you still get the same measure.
All right, whatever.
Okay. All right.
Representative Lipton.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I have is related to the report that the department put together. Are you familiar with that report?
I wouldn't say so, but
Is that a yes? You're familiar with the report that the department presented the last time we met
to the board,
to this committee?
I was not present at that time.
No, I understand that. Are you familiar with the report that they presented?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
You're not. Okay. In that report, there were a series of criteria that that the department looked at in terms of which particular test met that particular set of criteria. Are you familiar with that?
We've discussed them in state board, yes.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the department's the rendering of the criteria that they were looking at, as well as the conclusions based on the criteria that they selected.
I guess so.
Okay. It doesn't sound like you're familiar with the report that they gave to this committee.
I said I wasn't.
Okay.
Right. A specific question?
Well, it's based on that report, so if you're not familiar with it, then it's difficult to ask that question. So I'll ask it a different way. Are you familiar at all with the rollout of the Smarter Balanced test in other states, where it has been utilized already, and states are starting to have some experience with the Smarter Balanced test?
I understand that they're all at the same level that we are, so that there has not been.
Doctor, can you speak into the microphone? It's hard to hear you. I know you
Certainly.
gotta-
The other states in Smarter Balance are at the same stage that we are, so that there is no, I'm not aware of any states that are currently administering Smarter Balance. I do believe that they are aiming for spring of 2015, as we are.
But you are familiar with a number of states that are intending to pilot test Smarter Balance before they actually implement it. Is that something that seems reasonable?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Papageorge.
I think I missed something here. In the last meeting, I asked who decided Smarter Balance was the answer. Was this a sole source bid? Is the legislature at all been involved with the issue of what test we ought to use?
Smarter Balance has been about 7 to 8 years in the works. The department has reported on this to the legislature. There was a request for bids in December of 2013, and the department submitted its report on that. And the other major consortium that's developing a test based on these criteria is PARC. And as you can imagine, our state having invested time, money, and personnel in developing the Smarter Balance, it's not a surprise that they should have developed answers to our concerns, our questions, and have something ready to go in a way that other companies or consortiums have not.
Well, if you gave me that kind of leeway,
Yeah.
I can pick any test I want. That's my point. if the criteria for the best test is written by the guy that wants smarter balance, I can guarantee you, unless he or she doesn't know what they're doing, that smarter balance is going to win. That's precisely my point. Now, this criteria, if you come in and tell me we have this criteria and guess who won, I'm going to ask you, can I see the criteria? And I am reluctant to give away legislative authority to any executive authority out there. It's called separation of powers, and I happen to be just really hard over on that one. So I'm having a lot of trouble figuring out who decided smarter balance. Evidently, 44 of the people weren't even Michigan residents. They were from other states. And because there are 45 of them, 44 of which are from other states, I'm supposed to say, oh, this must be wonderful. I can't do that. I want to know what kind of competition there was in the state of Michigan for a test that's going to test Michigan students. And I was kind of gentle the first time around, but it didn't work. I'm telling you now, I need to know who it was decided outside the legislature that smarter balance was it. That's the whole idea of not doing sole source stuff. If you give me any kind of authority for sole source, I'll tell you who's going to win, the one I want to win. It's human nature. So I hope that we don't just jump on this thing and say, oh, wonderful, it's all done for us. Smarter balance, a lot of smart guys got involved with it. I don't doubt that you're highly committed and so on and so forth. And you know a lot more about this stuff than I do. I just know my job is no sole source bidding. And I'm having a lot of trouble till somebody explains to me who decided smarter balance was the answer. And I'd kind of like to see what the test was. The questions were for winning smarter balance. Were they detailed or were they yes or no answers? Fill in the block? What were they? And until I see that, I'm sorry. I'm not a no vote, but I'm just not ready to vote on anything till I get some more information on what's been going on.
Thanks, Senator. To the
thank
committee
you.
members who are here today, I didn't tell you all the people who've turned in cards, but we're going to hear very shortly from the ACT folks. They're going to talk about that. And if you go back to the committee meeting that we had a couple weeks ago, the department handed this out. This is not an RFP. This is an RFI. This is simply to get information on the number of testing companies out there and how they matched up with the criteria that the department laid out. So with that in mind, I know there's a lot of people that want to ask questions. Do you still want to ask questions to Dr. Z? Okay, well, I'm going to go down the list and we'll be cool. I have probably 25 cards here of people that came, some of them a long way in the snow, so we want to make sure we accommodate as many people as possible. Representative Janetsky.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Zeile, I appreciate your being here. And as a former teacher, and teachers statewide have been concerned for a while regarding the MEP. How did we know as teachers that the MEP was aligned to the GLICS, the grade level content expectations that we were supposed to teach every day? After last week's enlightening committee meeting, I asked the Department of Education if they could show to me as a teacher exactly and specifically how the Smarter Balanced Assessment would align to the Common Core standards. These are things that teachers are going to be judged on statewide, their ability to make sure that their students can answer the test questions. I got what I feel is kind of a document drop
Yes.
in return.
Yes.
And so I'm asking you as member of the State Board of Education, how exactly and specifically will we know that the Smarter Balance assessment test is aligned to the Common Core standards. For teachers statewide who need that information, who are going to be judged on it. They're going to have test scores in the paper, on the front page of the paper statewide. In some cases, people could be potentially dismissed if their students don't score well on the tests. How do we know exactly and specifically? Because I still don't feel that we were ever shown properly that the MEP was aligned to the GLICs.
Well, I think you make a good point. I don't know that our Smarter Balance will be more successful than the MEP in terms of communicating that to teachers. But that is the point of professional development, and the MDE has given a lot of thought, as well as professional associations, to the kinds of professional development that will make teachers aware of effective teaching strategies. I have to tell you, though, that theory and practice don't always conjoin. A good example is science. It was thought that, good background in elementary science will prepare our kids to excel in high school science. Surprise, surprise, a better background for kids, a better predictor for kids' success in secondary science was actually their reading and their math than their whatever hands-on experience they had with science beforehand. So, in the same way, there are a lot of theorists who feel that other approaches other than the traditional book learning method will be more effective in teaching our students. And there are some students that will be more effective that way. But I think at the end of the day, you'll find that traditional approaches to education will be most effective in helping students meet these standards.
On behalf of teachers statewide, I'm very concerned.
Sure.
That we're not going to see exactly and specifically how those are aligned on some website somewhere. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Representative Yonker, then Senator Caswell, Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've been hearing, I've served on school board for 8 years, and I've been hearing for probably the last 15, 20 years that our schools are teaching to the test. And that was with the MEP. So now we're looking at a Common Core that's been implemented. A lot of our schools, their teachers are adjusting their curriculum to meet these standards. All right. So our curriculums are being established, and we have not yet brought in an assessment tool. So my question is this not a better system that we're getting our classrooms set in curriculum, and we can adapt the test to the curriculum? Saying no one likes to teach to the test. Am I wrong in thinking that? And my second question, if you could touch on it, is based on your experience in evaluating the different assessment tests that are out there, because I'm going to assume that you have been part of that process, so you know the differences in those other tests. Is the Smarter Balance the test that can best be adapted to our curriculums that our schools are adapting within their schools?
The answer to the second question is yes, certainly. I wasn't quite clear on your first question, however.
It was, is it better having the process where we have our curriculums being established within our schools, and we find an assessment tool that's going to best match those tools, those curriculums?
The short answer is yes. Let me...
And will the Smarter Balance then meet that criteria as you compared them to the different tests that you looked at?
Yes. Yes. Traditionally, school testing has been of two kinds. One is a standardized test where you compare students with other students. And so you end up with a national percentile. Now that means that, and the ACT is an example of this kind of test. So there are questions on the ACT that don't appear on any school curriculum because you need a question to differentiate the 97th percentile students from the 98th percentile students. On the other hand, there are achievement tests, Stanford Achievement Test, California Achievement Tests, which test students against a specific set of criteria. These are criteria reference tests. The MEP tests endeavored to be criteria reference tests, but we changed the criteria and the method of testing and the vendors That was an administrative nightmare for a number of years because when something went wrong, we blamed the vendor and then changed the vendor, and the new vendor didn't have the opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the old vendor. So I hope we don't do that again this time around. So the smarter balance then is basically utilizing the criteria that we set, and in general that will be influenced by the Common Core standards. So Common Core standards are very, the word curriculum can be used in a very narrow sense, a scripted description of what each teacher does day to day, and or it can be very broad. I can buy a map of Michigan from Rand McNally, or I can buy one from Hammond, and there'll be some differences, but they both basically cover the same material. And in terms of standard tests, criterion reference tests, most of them cover 85 to 95% of the same material. That's why the shift to Common Core curricula wasn't that big a deal. It's not the panacea that its advocates claim. It's not the nightmare that some of its opponents claim.
Thank you. Senator Caswell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. About 6 or 7 years ago, I think the legislature adopted the ACT as the 11th grade proficiency test. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And help me remember, did the state board support that move? Do you remember?
I don't remember, and I was not part of the state board at that time. Yeah.
Prior to that, we had a MEP test
Yeah.
in the 11th grade, and nobody ever took that very seriously. We had to pay scholarship money to kids to get to take it seriously. But everybody took the ACT seriously because that was the gold standard, if you will, for getting into college. I guess what I'm struggling with here is if that's the gold standard, and we as a legislature have accepted that that is the proficiency test in 11th grade, then if we work backwards from that, why would it not make sense to use the ACT Aspire, which clearly delineates for each student whether they're ready to take that ACT, the gold standard, or they're not ready, where their deficiencies are at? If that's what we're building towards as a crescendo, if you will, that's the final act, why would we not support the ACT Aspire to build to that point? Can you help me with that?
Well, and I'm not personally familiar with Aspire, if it is the same kind of test as the ACT, traditionally speaking, it's a standardized test, and it uses a statistical sample of kids throughout the United States, and then you are measured against that statistical sample. So you always have 10% in the 90th percentile. You'll always have 10% at the bottom, and they measure students against a theoretical standard against other students. As opposed to a criterion reference test, which I would think would be better for our states for this purpose, because you want to measure against a set of criteria, and ideally, the ideal is that 100% of the students master all the criteria. You will never, and that's the problem with standardized tests. They can mask a lack of progress because no matter what class you get, you can always divide them according to the bell curve. Give the top 10% A's, even though they're not learning anything, and you give the bottom percent F's, no matter how well they've done, because they're measured against their classmates.
So, excuse me, if I'm hearing you correctly, your concern is that in taking the ACT Aspire, let's say in the 4th grade, every student may not be, quote unquote, ready at that grade level in terms of progress towards the gold standard. Your concern is every student may not be ready. You believe that the Aspire test would cause some students to have to be placed in the not ready category, even if they're ready, in order to meet the bell-shaped curve criteria. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes. Or Aspire is not the same kind of test as the ACT. Aspire may have its own set of criterion referenced references and they just slap the ACT name on there to sell it.
And rather than speculate, let me interrupt here. We're going to hear from
Thank you
Paul
very-
Weeks, and just he'll be the next guy, so he can answer your questions
Oh,
rather
very
than
good.
speculate what ACT
Thank you very much. I really appreciate
Yep.
elucidating
Senator
that.
Colbeck.
Thank you for reining me in on speculation there.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to try to be brief because I do want to respect the cards we have here. But I want to highlight, make sure I understand exactly what we're being asked to do as a legislature in context of our governance authority. In particular, please let me know whether or not I'm on the right track with my understanding of where we're going with this assessment discussion. Number one, I understand that we're going to have a linear test of this pilot of the Smarter Balance test in 2014, not computer adaptive, but just the linear portion of it in 2014. I also understand that in 2015 we expand that to a computer adaptive pilot, and in 2016 is really where I think the focus of this discussion is, and kind of the next phase in regards to the RFI, is that's when the RFP that's going to be following up on the RFI is going to be implemented to see what our testing mechanism is going forward. Is that a correct understanding of where this discussion sits?
Candidly not. I had understood we were going to begin implementing it in the spring of 2015, and that we had met the necessary criteria to move forward.
So 2015 is really the decision point we're talking about. There's no 2016 decision point. So the RFI that's out there is going to convert into an RFP for the 2015 timeframe.
Yes.
And the specs associated with that RFP, is the legislature going to be engaged in defining what those criteria are, to Senator Papa George's point? Because it's a policy discussion in many regards, and I think why you're seeing a lot of the pushback, especially around the idea of governance, is that we're talking about having some sort of Michigan control. I think that's one of the common themes around governance here. Right now, the only criteria I see in the RFI is Michigan control of the student data, and that's not the content of the test, and the content of the test is what drives the curriculum. So I just want to make sure that we go on record that I think what we're looking for, or at least I know what I'm looking for in regards to that RFP, is I want to make sure that we've got criteria in there that say Michigan control of the content of those exams. So as we go through in this RFP process, I appreciate if we can make sure that that view is represented somehow.
Certainly. We are in a situation like I've agreed with 20 of my neighbors we're going to all build each other's barns, and now I could get out of that and just insist on building my barn all by myself, and then I have to pay a lot more, or I can, but then going in with and receiving their assistance means I've got to assist them.
Yep.
So it is a choice that was made when Michigan first entered, adopted Common Core, and became part of Smarter Balance, that we would do a lot of this work through this consortium. Michigan has had a say, in fact, had a major say, major determination. I'm sure other states resent our influencing the Smarter Balance process to the extent that we have. But in terms of what's finally taught and what's finally tested, that is a Michigan decision. And we'll be relying on a bank of questions and a platform, if you will, that's been developed by our consortium, Smarter Balance.
By the consortium.
Yeah, and just to be clear, there aren't 45 people in that consortium. There's like
Right,
14.
right. There's about 20.
14 or so.
The other 20 are in Park, a different
there's
consortium.
Right, and the purpose of this committee is to go through and evaluate and learn as much as we can about the different assessment tools that are out there. So with that, I'm going to excuse you, Dr. Z, and move on to Paul Weeks. Paul Weeks is with ACT, the Aspire Assessing System, and wishing to speak and supports the issue. Thank you.
Chairwoman Lyons, Chairman Pavlov, members of the Education Appropriations Committee. Pleasure to join you this afternoon to talk about ACT Aspire assessment system for grades 3 through 10, which is benchmarked to help all students achieve college and career readiness. ACT is an independent not-for-profit organization that provides assessment and research services in education and workforce development. We're perhaps best known for the ACT college entrance test, but our scope and range go far beyond that exam. All ACT programs have one guiding mission: to help people achieve education and workplace success. For more than 50 years, ACT has been developing and updating information on students' academic readiness for success in post-secondary education and training. ACT is the only organization with decades of data showing exactly what happens to high school graduates once they get to college or workforce training programs based on how well they were prepared in middle and high school. Our approach is unique in that our assessments are grounded in research that tells us what knowledge and skills are essential in order for students to be college and career ready. ACT has worked with the state of Michigan to measure college and career readiness of all public high school students since 2007, when the ACT College Readiness Assessment and Work Keys were incorporated into the Michigan Merit Exam. I refer you to the second slide in the deck that I had shared. During that time, attainment of college readiness benchmark scores has risen steadily across all subject areas, and there's been a 30% increase. Nearly 6,000 more students identified in Michigan as meeting all four of the college readiness benchmark scores. And with all due respect to the previous speaker, if the ACT test was as was characterized, such growth wouldn't be realized. In addition, last year, over 75,000 Michigan graduates earned a Silver National Career Readiness Certificate or higher, fueling workforce efforts in the state. The department and the educators in this state should be commended for this improvement. Under a pilot project, Michigan also administers ACT Explore to 8th grade students and Plan to 10th grade students. These programs enable educators to monitor student progress toward college and career readiness and to make academic interventions when necessary to keep students on target. Each of these programs provides all students, including those who have never considered college an option, with the opportunity to identify strengths, perhaps consider college for the first time, and prepare to meet educational and career goals. Recently, ACT has developed the ACT Aspire system for students in grades 3 through 10 to extend the ability of ACT's program to monitor student progress at earlier stages in education, as well as to respond to the new challenges offered by the Common Core state standards. We know from ACT research that academic achievement by 8th grade is a great predictor of college and career readiness by the end of high school. ACT Aspire would enable Michigan to monitor and intervene with at-risk students even earlier than has previously been allowed with ACT Explore and ACT Plan alone. In my written testimony, which has been distributed, I describe in more detail the background of ACT's development of a next-generation assessment system linked to the Common Core standards. I present an overview of the ACT Aspire system, outline the value of that system to users, including reporting, and briefly discuss our policies regarding security, confidentiality, and ownership of data. I will summarize the key points of that testimony for you now. ACT's long history of college and career readiness research and assessment was relied upon extensively in the Common Core State Standards Initiative, which began in 2009. ACT staff served in multiple capacities, including writing and reviewing standards, but mostly bringing evidence to that conversation. ACT's college readiness standards, validated standards, served as one of the foundations on which the Common Core state standards were based. In addition, our empirical definition of college and career readiness, the acquisition of knowledge and skills needed to succeed in a credit-bearing first-year course at a 2- or 4-year college without the need for remediation, was adopted by the Common Core State Standards Initiative and continues to be cited in the priorities and expectations of Common Core and states that have adopted the Common Core. We've leveraged this extensive research to build ACT Aspire to assist states' efforts to monitor and improve student progress, beginning in grade 3. ACT Aspire is based on an articulated and sequential progression of knowledge and skills which ultimately connect to college and career readiness and success. ACT Aspire is a longitudinal assessment system in English, math, reading, science, and writing that connects student progress from elementary through early high school in the context of college and career readiness. It was built with a deep understanding of how students develop and demonstrate achievement. It comprises a system with a sequence of achievement tests capable of measuring growth in a consistent and comparable fashion. We've been able to build ACT Aspire expressly to measure college and career readiness as well as align and report to the Common Core. But the ACT Aspire system will go beyond Common Core state standard subjects of English, language arts, and math to measure performance in science and writing. Used in combination with the ACT, it completes a uniform and aligned assessment system from grade 3 through high school that is not currently possible with any other set of assessments. ACT Aspire will be delivered online with a paper and pencil option available. System includes a mix of item types, constructed response, selected response, and technology enhanced. It's modular so that states and districts can focus their efforts on specific subjects or grade levels if they choose. In 2012 and 13, ACT conducted field tests of ACT Aspire in both paper and pencil and computer-based formats across 31 states, including more than 45,000 students at 153 Michigan schools. The summative component of ACT Aspire will be available in spring of 2014, with interim and formative components launched in the fall of 14. In May of this year, the state of Alabama will be the first to implement ACT Aspire as its statewide summative assessment for grades 3 through 8, and like Michigan, Alabama will administer the ACT to all 11th grade public school students beginning this spring. ACT Aspire is an interactive system that provides deep and rich insights into student performance, as well as additional resources and tools not possible with traditional reporting methods. The reports produced by assessment results reflect the needs of educators, students, and parents, and facilitate effective early academic interventions with off-target students. ACT Aspire will report student performance in the categories identified and aligned to the Common Core State Standards language, so teachers will get direct information about the performance in the context of those standards. Reports will display information in a clean, direct manner with both numerical and graphical representations supported by text. Thus, the full range of faculty from novice through expert can immediately gain insights. For example, I've included 2 sample reports in your packet. Student reports available to students and parents include the student's performance on each subject, English, math, reading, science, and writing, and indicate the level of college and career readiness in each subject. The report also lists improvement ideas for students performing at lower skill levels. It's important to clarify that for the lower grades, we're not telling students whether they are college or career ready. We're telling them whether they are on path, on the trajectory toward college and career readiness as later measured on the ACT. Teacher reports are user-friendly and actionable, grouping subject proficiency by students so that teachers can easily identify the range of student performance from those exceeding benchmarks to those needing additional supports. The teacher report also includes student growth distributions and skill level performance breakdowns. ACT has been pleased to serve the state of Michigan in its mission of increasing college and career readiness for all students. ACT has established relationship and expertise Michigan can rely on to help deliver a state assessment aligned with the Common Core state standards. With ACT Aspire, Michigan has the potential to monitor students' performance and growth in a focused and systematic way throughout their educational careers from early to upper levels. ACT looks forward to extending its collaboration with Michigan. We'll continue to provide the high-quality assessments, research, and data that the state values. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about my testimony or ACT Aspire, or to clarify any question around our responses to the Michigan Department of Education's assessment survey in December. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And I think what you're going to see from this committee is we have an enormous amount of interest in the competition, the alternatives to Smarter Balance. I think if you listen to the first round of questions, that's what you heard. Last week, we went through the department's report that they gave to the legislature, and there were 10 or 11 different testing systems that responded to the request for information. How do you view the fact that ACT, do you think that you were treated fairly in terms of the department's assessment of where you guys were in the implementation of your test product? Because there's a lot of open bubbles and a lot of questions here. What I'm trying to get a sense of is, was this weighted toward the decision to move with the Smarter Balance, or do you feel that this was an objective RFI?
I think that the survey was such that it was difficult to fully and completely articulate the value of all the systems that were looked at. I think in particular for ACT Aspire, since our development agenda has been based on a research and development agenda that ACT has been on for some time, since we derived college readiness standards in the late 1990s and empirically defined college readiness in our seminal research in 2003, I think the comparisons were not always accurate, and again, just didn't give us the opportunity to elaborate on what it is we're trying to do, and that's why I welcome this opportunity to kind of clarify some of those points.
So from your point of view, I mean, are you operating on the assumption that the department has made its decision on Smarter Balance, and you may or may not have a crack at offering a legitimate assessment?
So, as is the case when ACT is dealing with states, I mean, we have 13 states that are currently administering the ACT to all of its 11th graders. We have another 17 states that are using Explore, Plan, ACT, and some combination. And our role with all of those states as they make their decisions about the future of an assessment program is to serve as a resource and make sure that they understand what the ACT solutions are. In some cases, while it's not our place to speak for other consortia, inevitably there are comparison conversations that go on. So, our role is to serve as a resource and make sure that we inform conversations and decisions that are taking place.
Senator Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really like the question you asked because it was pretty much the same one I was going to ask. But I'll try to do it in a different way. Maybe give an example or with regards to the RFI and the request for information in there. I guess some of the questions, I guess a gross exaggeration might be, please describe your computer adaptive testing in this area, something like that. Well, you guys don't offer computer adaptive testing, so was that kind of the way you were maybe shut out of affirmative responses in this RFI?
So, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. An example such as that is pretty clear.
That was an exaggeration, yeah.
But there are situations where the way a question may be asked, ACT's intent was to respond honestly and accurately to every question, and in some cases, they didn't allow an opportunity to elaborate on the answer. So, for example, a question about the number of forms that might be available in a certain time period, in fall of 2014, for example, the answer that we provided may have been a little misleading in that where our roadmap was and what we'd have in fall of 14 versus spring of 15 and beyond. So it's things like that again, further discussion allows us to clarify a little bit.
Thank you. Representative Kniezek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't expecting to go so quickly. Couple questions, and I appreciate the Chair and Senator Walker's first questions because I also have the same. As it relates to the online-based testing, paper pencil options, these are questions and concerns I've had from the beginning as it relates to Michigan's capacity right now for taking on that type of model. In my district, we've got just in one middle school, 800 kids, 60 computers. Assuming those 60 computers are fully operational all day, morning and afternoon, I've got 120 seats. If I'm putting each student, 800 kids, through 9 different testing seat days, if you will, or nine different seat days, if you will, I'm looking at 7,200 seats. 120 a day, I'm looking at 60 days to get kids through the test. And we're talking about 20-day windows. So the math doesn't make sense. If the state of Michigan was going to go with ACT Aspire, how long is it going to take for us to administer the test to the kids? And is it a reasonable time frame? And I have a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I can.
So the development of ACT Aspire was really the result of a confluence of a number of factors, one of which is user needs and market demands. We'd like to think that we are really trying to meet users where they are. And when it comes to readiness for online testing overall, that's certainly one of them. ACT has actually a very strong computer adaptive capability. We've led the industry in terms of operational computer adaptive testing, research. We've been delivering our Compass program for years. We have informed leading practices, research, done scholarly work, have patents in this area. For large-scale assessment, of agreed-upon grade level standards, computer adaptives might introduce more problems than it solves. We think it's possible to evaluate progress of students against state performance standards with kind of that fixed ruler, and in a form of a relatively brief test covering each grade standards. We've been very conscious of overall testing time. So it was our decision, it was our determination to build ACT Aspire in the way that it is, and that is a linear online test with a paper and pencil option. We see great opportunities for adaptive tests in the future when all students are able to test online, but we still want to take advantage of all that technology might bring. Quicker turnaround, improved security, lower costs. But we think that as long as schools and states need to continue using paper and pencil and aren't yet able to accommodate the large volumes of students with online testing for whatever reason, whether it's hardware, software, connectivity, or facilities, we took the position that comparability and fairness across the modes of testing should drive the day, and that's why we did what we did. So what we've tried to do is offer an alternative for those that are ready for CBT testing, and to be sure there are. There's a mixed bag across the country from state to state, but for those who are not, we wanted to make sure that we had a strong paper and pencil alternative.
So you actually kind of answered what my next question was. So I'm going to come back and revisit that first question. The next one was going to be, how long is this paper pencil option available for you guys? When we're talking about smarter balances, well, for the first 3 years you can have the option. Year 4, I'm supposed to magically have enough computers to meet the capacity. So if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, are you going to continue to offer the paper and pencil option until we're able to meet that need, or is there going to be a cutoff point for you guys as well?
We haven't established any cutoff point. We are intending to offer paper and pencil option into the foreseeable future. We are going to monitor the market and the readiness for that. We are doing the same across all of our solutions with just a few exceptions. But we know that the market has spoken loud and clear about the need for paper and pencil for the foreseeable future. And
again, the first question was how long is it going to take to administer the test? And so if we could revisit that, are we talking days? Are we talking a month? To put the kids through, what am I looking at?
So the total testing time for the battery, if you will, and that is all 5 subject areas, English, math, reading, science, and writing. If it's done in total, spans from just a little under 4 hours in the earlier grades to a little over 4 hours, close to 4.5 hours at the early high school level.
Thank you. And I'd also like to mention that State Board member Eileen Weiser has joined us. Welcome. And Representative Muxlow is here as well. Thanks for coming, Paul. Senator Papageorge.
We're all trapped by our experiences. And in the previous life, one of my responsibilities at General Dynamics Land Systems was to run the proposal center. And when we put out an RFQ or an RFP, we didn't necessarily look for yes and no answers. We said, here's what we want to get to. How would you guys do it? And how long will it take? And what will it cost? And when we got those answers, it was pretty hard to put them into a chart that said a yes or no chart. What we were looking for is the system that they were proposing and how close would it come to meeting the goal we had in mind. Having looked at this RFI again, it's not really an RFI, it's an exam. Be pretty much hard to beat the guy who put the exam together. That's just a comment, colleagues.
Rep. McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be real quick. I'm looking at the resolution that passed last year, and it says that the State Board of Education may take steps to remove conflict of interest and provide objectivity in this analysis. Obviously, they've signed a document that says that they will do everything they can to make sure SBAC is successful. So we, and Representative Lipton actually, I think, in committee wanted to make sure that was in there. It appears they didn't try to do that, and hence we have these controversies that we're talking about. Quickly, your folks did not receive $200 million like SBAC did from the federal government, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And so you don't have a federal oversight committee looking at your questions. There's nobody signing off or agreeing to your questions that you have on the test. Is that right?
Our item development goes through the standard processes that we employ, which is to, have educators, review fairness, bias committees, and the like. But there is no federal oversight.
Right.
Correct.
I mean, there's no agreement, so you don't have to give them anything since you didn't get $200 million. And there's no data sharing. Do you share student level data with the federal government?
We do not share student level data.
Okay. So unlike SBAC, you guys don't. Good. And then finally, there's this issue of a 12-week window with the SBAC. So teacher evaluations or school evaluations that get tested real early don't get that benefit of an additional 11 weeks of instruction in order to do better on the test. What's your window for the ACT? I mean, is it and during that 12 weeks, I just can't believe that there's not going to be any problems with, iPhones taking pictures and all kinds of, there's going to be major issues with the SBAC. Do you folks have a 12-week window, or do you have some as far as security and things like that?
So let me address that in two ways. First, yes, we have defined windows. This year, in the first operational implementation, we're beginning in April, and that window will extend. There's actually two windows, but they'll extend into May. And then we'll have a fall window for the summative assessments made available in future years, as well as probably multiple spring windows. And there are a number of reasons for that. We want to give as much flexibility to users at the school district and state level as is possible, but we also want to be mindful of issues of test security, both in the computer and the paper and pencil forms. And so we do that through a variety of means, certainly good training of test administration and procedures that try to maximize test security, but we also do it with some scrambling of forms so that the order of items, when possible, can be altered so that it makes looking at one's neighbor's work very difficult because the sequence is different. But we'll also, in future years, and as test form development ramps up, we'll also have multiple forms spiraled for users as well. So test security is and always has been a concern for organizations like ACT, and something that we take very seriously.
Thank you. Senator Caswell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to make sure that I understand. On the Aspire tests, let's say we're in third grade, is there a requirement in your tests that the outcomes of the students have to fit a bell curve? Is it possible that every buckshot in that class, the whole third grade, could be ACT ready? Is it possible that every kid could be ACT not ready, and all things in between?
Yes, and thank you for the question, because it allows me to just kind of clarify the characterization of the ACT. The ACT, while it does provide normative comparative information, the ACT is not a norm reference test in the classic sense, in that it forces a distribution of students. Put another way, if we had a room full of high-achieving students, there's nothing to keep them all from scoring a 36. The ACT measures performance against an absolute standard. We have college readiness standards that are published, and even though the ACT is designed to be a domain sample test in that any given form may or may not touch certain standards, there's transparency in putting out that kind of a test, and our test blueprints do that. Similarly, ACT Aspire has been designed in the same way. It's been designed to efficiently and effectively leverage that research to identify performance in an efficient and reasonable testing time so that we can make inferences about where students are on that trajectory toward college and career readiness. So to answer your question, Senator Caswell, directly, there's nothing that would force a distribution of students. Theoretically, all students can achieve at the highest level. Theoretically, all students could underperform at a disappointing level. And what we will probably see is some distribution thereof, but that's not a function of the test design.
And Mr. Chairman, I might add, if we were in Lake Wobegon, every student would be above average.
Only there. Thank you. Representative Brown, then Representative Janetzky.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Weeks, I know the legislature a number of years ago put some pretty aggressive timelines in place for us to be ready to go. Can Aspire actually be ready by April or spring, whenever it is, spring of 2015?
It better be. We actually have to be ready by spring of 14. As I mentioned in my testimony, we have anticipated 1.8 million students ready to test on or about April 1. We have, keep in mind, last spring, in spring of 2013, we tested, we had some 600,000 student responses on operational forms that were administered on the platform that we intend to use, the TestNav platform. That study, in addition to allowing us to do comparability, scaling, and equating studies, also allowed us to learn a lot of lessons. We actually have tweaked some things to the platform, gave us an opportunity to go out again in the fall and test for user experience again with some of those enhancements, learned yet a few more lessons, and so by the time we go operational in spring of 14 in the state of Alabama and in a number of other places, we will have tested operational forms a couple of times, and so yeah, we'll be operational in April.
Representative Janetzky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Weeks, I appreciate your being here. Again, teachers' perspective, how will teachers know exactly and specifically that ACT Aspire is aligned to the Common Core state standards which they'll be expected to teach?
The ACT's practice with Explore Plan and ACT has been such that we publish the college readiness standards, which are the anchor, the backbone of the system, if you will. And we know that there are great demands on teachers, that there are a lot of standards that are thrown at them. What we've tried to do with our research is identify those that are most essential for college and career readiness as evidenced by the research that we've done. We intend to do the same with ACT Aspire. We intend to report to the reporting categories for the standards that have been placed in front of the teachers, and for those places that have adopted the Common Core state standards, we want to be able to report in that same language so that they won't be confused. I appreciated the conversation about teaching to the test. We think it's really important to teach to the standards, to focus on those standards, to understand them. We believe that a lot of support, professional development needs to be provided, not only as it relates to the standards, but also as it relates to data literacy and assessment literacy for our educators. We think that in addition to the summative assessments, which can identify kind of a snapshot of the cohort of students and give us some idea of their strengths and weaknesses, we think that the aligned interim and classroom tools and formative tools play a very important part in getting down to informing the personal pathways and the interventions that an individual student might need. So when we've talked a lot about the ACT Aspire summative tests, but they are part of a system of assessments, and they need to be used in a complementary manner to be a real effective tool in the hands of the teacher. Last thing I would say, again, consistent with what we've done in the past, we're just a couple of weeks away from releasing our technical report, which will include the test blueprints, and again, our goal is transparency with the educators so they know what it is students are going to be measured on. And again, while not all users might employ the entire battery, we remain committed to all areas, including science, going forward.
And the technical report is available to whom?
It will be posted on the website.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Colbeck. quick question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's about governance again. Key theme is what control do we have in the state of Michigan, either MDE or other agent of the state, over the content that's administered on the exam?
For a number of reasons, not the least of which is comparability and the ability to report to the validated college and career readiness standards. The intention would be to always administer ACT Aspire assessments intact. That said, we have a history in working with states like Michigan and Illinois and others who desire a state-specific score scale to literally look at the items and decide whether or not one might be appropriate in the calculation of that state score scale. So our off-the-shelf solution, so to speak, will offer comparability in a context of a validated score scale that folks are familiar with, the ACT, along with the ACT College Readiness Benchmark scores. But that doesn't mean there can't be any configurability, either through augmentation or through other scoring methods that might best meet a state's needs.
Thank you, Paul. We appreciate your testimony, and members know that you submitted written testimony as well with some background. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call up Bob Kefchin and Wendy Roper, Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals. And we're going to try to get through a number of these cards. We've got people that have come from far away as Washington, so we want to be respectful of their time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committees. Good afternoon. My name is Bob Kefchin. I am the Assistant Director for Government Relations with the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals. With me today is our Executive Director at MASSP, Wendy Zadeb-Roper. We're here today to give you a principal's perspective on our next state assessment, on the questions of state assessment. Briefly, before I turn it over to Wendy, I just wanted to draw your attention. We handed out a packet beforehand. There are 3 things in this. One is a copy of our written testimony, so you have that. We have a 1-page infographic in there explaining where we're coming from on the question of assessment. And the third thing in there is a sample report that Wendy's going to refer to in her testimony. And with that, Wendy Zadeb-Roper.
Thank you for having us today. Building principals recognize the important role that assessments play in helping to inform and improve classroom practice, curriculum, and student achievement. Over the last several months, we have closely studied and compared the available options and have sought extensive feedback from principals across the state. As the practitioners perhaps held most accountable for instructional leadership, principals are passionate about this topic. We also recognize that the selection of the state assessment is not something that can be taken lightly or without serious consideration to the ripple effect it will have on the ESEA waiver, the impact on school accountability, and on educator evaluation. As you consider the various assessment options, we'd like to share the elements that we feel are must-haves and explain why we believe ACT Aspire and the ACT are the best choice for Michigan. Schools need a Common Core aligned annual summative assessment in grades 3 through 11 that measures the core content areas to track student performance.
I would add to that that our current testing pattern provides annual growth right now only in English language arts and math in grades 3 to 8. Remember also that our proposed system, the Smarter Balance system combined with state-level MEP tests, would also only provide student growth in English language arts and math in grades 3 through 8. It wouldn't give us student growth in other subjects, and it wouldn't give us student growth necessarily in high school where the Smarter Balance only offers an 11th grade option.
Schools need an assessment system that includes an annual summative assessment that's supported with options for daily classroom level formatives and standards-based interims at the semester or trimester to help teachers to adjust instruction and support students in an ongoing manner. We can't just wait until the spring of each school year to find out if students have learned the material. The goal at the end of high school is to graduate students who are career and college ready. Schools need annual assessments that are aligned to the end goal so we can track student progress along the way and make sure that they're on target for college and career readiness.
So to be clear, that doesn't mean we're going to be testing third graders and giving them a projected ACT score. What we're testing for third graders is, are they ready for 4th grade, and so on and so forth up to 11th grade, so that by the time they hit 11th grade, we know whether they're on track to be career and college ready.
Alignment to that end goal also provides an intrinsic motivation for students to take the assessment seriously and to do their best. As any high school principal will attest to, students arrive for day one of the Michigan Merit Exam testing, which is ACT Day, with an entirely different attitude than they do for days 2 and 3. In many schools, completion of all 3 days of testing is a graduation requirement, just to ensure that they will reach their required participation rate. The buy-in factor also shows in our scores, as ACT scores continue to go up and the overall Michigan Merit Exam scores have gone down. This is not just true with 11th graders. The question of student buy-in is why over 286,000 students in districts around the state took ACT's Explore and Plan assessments in grades 7 through 10. There is tremendous buy-in to the EPASS system, as students and parents want to see the predicted ACT score and to have clear direction on each student's strengths and weaknesses. This leads to the importance of quality reporting. Teachers and principals must receive timely feedback from the state assessment, and the reports need to provide meaningful and actionable information. You had a chance to see a sample of reports that are available from ACT Aspire. For comparison's sake, I brought a copy of a MEEP report, which is in your folder. So if you pull this one out, you can see in this report, students and schools are provided with strand-level data that does not give meaningful or useful feedback to the teacher or to the student. This is relevant to our conversation today because with Smarter Balanced, Michigan will still be responsible for contracting independently for its own scoring and reporting, just as we currently do for the MEEP. Remember also that Smarter Balanced only assesses English, language arts, and math. The current plan is to continue developing state-level science and social studies MEEP tests to be administered in 5th, 8th, and 11th grade. So these strand-level MEEP reports are likely to be the reality for schools moving forward if we stay on the current course. Finally, this brings us to the issue of time spent testing students. As principals, we have very real concerns about any loss of instructional time due to an increase in standardized testing. At a recent forum, MDE was asked about its plan for testing 11th grade students. It was explained that 11th graders would take the ACT, WorkKeys, Smarter Balanced Math, Smarter Balanced Language Arts, MEEP Science, and MEEP Social Studies. In a conservative estimate, this is 15 hours of testing. Also keep in mind, these assessments are created by 3 different vendors, making it difficult for schools to prepare students accordingly. It is for these reasons that 80% of MASSP members indicated in a recent survey that they prefer ACT Aspire as the state's next assessment. MASSP has met with the Department of Education about our concerns regarding their plans for student assessment. I believe that MDE is well-intentioned and is trying to develop an assessment system that meets schools' needs. They started down the path of preparing for Smarter Balanced when there were only 2 assessment options available. However, the marketplace has expanded, and additional assessment systems are now available. We know from states like Kentucky, Alabama, and Missouri, who also have recently amended and have had their ESEA waivers approved to use ACT and ACT Aspire as part of their assessment system, that the Smarter Balanced is no longer our only option. We owe it to Michigan students to consider all options available at this time, and we believe we should move forward with a proven testing company with over 50 years of experience and a long-term relationship with Michigan.
So to reiterate briefly, Mr. Chair, the principals come at this particular problem looking at the things that we think are most important in the test, and we find those things in ACT Aspire. Reasonable testing time, the number of subjects covered, the quality of reports, alignment to career and college readiness standards, and student motivation. Thank you for your time today, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Thank you. Real quick, Representative Kniezek and then Representative Abed.
So when I graduated high school 10 years ago, I was so excited that the rumor mill was going to finally come to an end. And then I got elected to the legislature, and I found that's what we thrive on up here. And so, you know, obviously you guys are giving a pretty full-throated support and endorsement of the ACT, and there's been some nasty rumors going around about that. So I'd like to respectfully call you to the carpet and just ask if there's any sort of financial relationship currently in existence between your organization and ACT that would potentially lend itself to such an endorsement.
Thank you for the question, Representative, and I appreciate the opportunity to answer this directly. I've heard the same rumors out there. MASSP, the only financial relationship we have at all with ACT is that in past years they have sponsored speakers, in fact half of speakers for us at conferences. Last year this totaled something like $3,000, which is by no means even the largest sponsorship we have, and is a not a very large sponsorship compared to other organizations. That's it. Like I said, the reason we're so adamant about ACT doesn't have anything to do with the financial benefit to MASSP. It's specifically because we feel it's the best assessment and meets the needs of principals and students. Thank you for the question.
Representative Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. And I know with the ACT, it's a very well-respected and well-known name, and so I think you have that going for you. However, what my concern is, and if you could expound on this further, I know they addressed this a little bit previously, but I'm still not real comfortable with the answer, so maybe you can explain it more. What the ACT has been used for is for college readiness. In fact, you're the one with the ACT is college and career ready was the term that they started. However, what it's been used for is for entry into colleges. And so with those scores, you can get scholarships, you can get into certain colleges. I mean, that's the purpose is there. So when you, with the ACT, what it measures is the likelihood of a student earning a B or better in college and being successful. And then what it then says because of that is those that don't might not be successful, which isn't really accurate because you could still not score a B and be successful. So what my question is that the purpose of the ACT was to see who would be on the top, the B or better, scholarships, who could get into what colleges. This will be a whole different focus. And what I worry about is, you know, how you're going to change that perspective because, as was said by a senator previously, is that we're no longer talking about a standardized test. We're no longer talking about comparing student to student. What we're doing is comparing students to the Common Core and how they are measuring up to the Common Core. So I have some significant concerns regarding the labeling and what the labeling has meant before and what will it mean now and how you make that transition. Thank you.
I think we kind of have to make a separation between ACT, the 11th grade assessment, and ACT Aspire, which is a brand new product. So in terms of messaging, I agree with you. You know, there's going to definitely have to be significant teaching and explanation of how the scores work. If you look at the packet that ACT provided for you that has the sample score reports, for example, one of the things that I was impressed with in looking at the different ways that schools are going to receive information back, teachers are going to be able to see the questions that were answered or asked on the assessment in terms of what Common Core standard is being measured and what college and career readiness standard is being measured. Having that dual benefit is huge, and that ensures that this is, you know, addressing the Common Core standards so that teachers don't feel like we have a different curriculum than what we're assessing. So I think that closes that gap. And as we indicated, it's not going to say in a third grader's report or a fourth grader's report, you know, what their college readiness level is at that point. It's just, are you now third grade ready? Are you now fourth grade ready? Based on what you've demonstrated. I think in terms of classroom, which Rep. Janetsky always really likes to talk about, what's this going to look like in the classroom? I think those formative assessments that they have available in the interim that we can use at the semester and at the trimester, that gives us that snapshot from just that 10-week period of time or 20-week period of time. And that's where teachers can really dig down deep and be able to work with students to help them improve and attain those benchmarks. So I do think it's a messaging thing. We are going to have to separate kind of mentally the ACT from the ACT Aspire, but I think that can be done, and I love the fact that we can actually have a unified system where we're all heading in the same direction. You may remember that when the MEP scores, cut scores were reset, that was based on the ACT college readiness standards because we had all kinds of kids, 98% of the kids were proficient on the MEP test, and then when they got to high school, all of a sudden nobody was meeting it, right? So we are realigned based on that. So we have a history of kind of trying to do this alignment in an ununiformed way, and I feel like this would combine a lot of dots for us.
The other thing I'd want to add to that, Representative, is remember that we're talking about a career and college readiness standard. So you've got the ACT in the 11th grade, which was originally designed as a college entrance exam. You're absolutely right there. At the 11th grade level right now, though, we also test with WorkKeys, which is another ACT product, but that's a workforce readiness assessment. We're talking about assessing career and college readiness. And as part of what you'd get with ACT Aspire, they look not just at alignment to your Common Core, your career readiness goals. They pull out certain reports, like they have a STEM report in there. They also have a workforce ready report. So you're looking at not just students against an absolute benchmark of college ready. You're able to break that data down at much finer levels so that you can use these results to inform instruction for all kinds of different kinds of students.
Thank you. I just want to remind members I have 16 cards here in 50 minutes. We're going to be out of here right at 5 o'clock. Members have other commitments, so I'd like to move on to Representative Yonker. Whenever you're ready, Ken. Okay, very well. All right. Well, thank you. Seeing no other questions, appreciate your input. I want to call up Amber Ariano and Sarah Lefford at Trust Midwest, Royal Oak. What did I say?
Ledford.
She misspelled her own name. Go
Good
ahead.
afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you. Can I start right in? I know we don't have much time.
Fire away.
We will be brief.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing us to come and speak with you today. I know it's a busy day.
Can you
My
speak
name
a little
is-
closer to the microphone?
Sorry,
Right?
yeah, sure. Just want to, it's the red light. There we go. Okay. Thank you so much for having us today. I know it's a very busy day, and we appreciate your time. My name is Amber Arellano. I'm the Executive Director of the Education Trust Midwest. With me today is Sarah Lenhoff. She is our Policy and Research Director, and she's also one of Michigan's experts in our current statewide school accountability system. We are a nonpartisan, data-driven education, research, information, and advocacy organization that promotes high achievement for all Michigan students at all levels K-16. We work to be a source of nonpartisan information about Michigan education and particularly achievement gap closing. That's really our mission. Our mission is to close the achievement gap in our state. Our organization has long been a supporter of college and career-ready assessments and standards, and we believe that the implementation of these standards and aligned assessment system will provide us with an unprecedented opportunity to transform our public schools teaching and learning and ensure that all of our students are college and career ready. This is really important, particularly as we transition from being an automotive and industrial economy to a competitive knowledge economy. One of our first efforts in Michigan that we did a few years ago was we led a campaign to raise the state's low cut scores, if some of you may recall that. Our state leaders had essentially not been honest with Michiganders about how well our schools have served our students. Our efforts helped lead the state to raise the cut scores in 2011 with our proposed new state assessment system. In whatever shape it comes in, we believe that families and educators won't have to worry about that happening again. We wanted to share today some criteria based on what 6 months of research and best practices from around the country tell us are very important for a new state assessment system. We've also spoke with more than 20 Michigan organizations, including the major business organizations, parent organizations, K-12 organizations, and educators in Washtenaw, Livingston, Kent, Wayne, and Oakland counties, to really inform the criteria that we wanted to share with you today. So the criteria is long. We are only going to highlight a few of the key ideas here because we know our time is short and we want to respect the time that we have.
And you can see our full criteria in our written testimony that you all have. So the first thing we want to make clear is that our new assessment system should focus on college and career readiness. Michigan needs a state assessment system that's designed to measure performance against the fullest possible breadth of our college and career ready standards, to give parents and educators a clear idea of how well prepared their children are for the modern workplace and college, any assessment that we use must undergo an independent and trustworthy review to ensure that it is fully aligned and designed to measure the depth of the standards as well. It should also be designed to measure the complex knowledge and rigor that our new standards have. So it should not assess just basic facts. It should cover the full range of content and skills in our new standards, including whether students can understand complex ideas, complete tasks that require higher order thinking skills, and explain their thinking through performance tasks such as essays. This is one reason why some assessments like PARCC or Smarter Balanced may take a little bit longer in the testing time. It takes time to measure students' writing skills and deeper thinking and knowledge skills. The new assessment system should also provide comparable information comparing our students to their counterparts in other states around the country. Families and business leaders need to know how well we are preparing our children to be the workforce and leaders of the future, and we need to know how we're doing compared to the nation and the rest of the world.
We also want to just mention that we think our new assessment needs to be parent-friendly. There are states like Tennessee that now offer things like what's called student projection reports. So for a mom of a fourth grader can find out how well her daughter is on track to graduate from high school. That parent can also request that information from their school, from that report, to say, right now, what is my child on track to get on the ACT? That can be very powerful information for parents. I know as a parent, for me, I would want to know early on in my child's K-12 career if they're not on track to be college ready, right? And I'm sure many of you feel the same way. We also think an assessment that is educator-friendly, that provides instructional materials to actually help educators make the instructional shifts that we need to make. I mean, that's the whole opportunity with higher standards. You know, we've had, as many of you know, we've had an antiquated test that was really built to serve a state when we were still an industrial economy, when we had automotive factories and we were preparing people to be industrial workers. The standards are really about deeper thinking and critical skills, and we need materials that will help support teachers in making the instructional shifts that they need to make in order for us to really boost our student achievement, which we really need to do if you've seen our decline compared to other states around the country on the national assessment. Just another quick thing that we want to mention, we also want to caution the legislature about allocating public dollars to support one state assessment for educator evaluations and to measure student performance, and another assessment to measure student growth for school accountability purposes. Such a move would result in unnecessary additional testing time for students and unnecessary and significant additional costs for the state to bear. In addition, that scenario, or such a scenario, would result in an incoherent and unfair and confusing state accountability framework for principals, teachers, district leaders around the state. We actually did a piece in Bridge Magazine in December that talked about the importance of the new data that we'll be able to get out of this assessment to inform instruction and to get much more fair student growth data. We co-authored that piece with the Mackinac Center, Grand Rapids Public School Superintendent, and a number of other leaders around the state. And if it's something you're interested, we'd be happy to share it with you. But it's really important that we get the student growth piece right, and we wanted to mention that as well. We thank you for your time, and we welcome your input and thoughts.
Thank you very much. Real quick question. So are you leaning toward one of the assessments rather than over the other?
So right now, based on our criteria, it's really a mix of assessments. You know, and there are multiple assessments that would meet this criteria. The comparability for us, and I know some of the other organizations around the state, is really important because we have had such a problem with providing honest information to parents about how well we're really doing as a state compared to other states. So that's really important to us. Given that currently, given the landscape and what states have decided to do around the country, our understanding is that PARCC and Smarter Balance would meet the comparability criteria. someday, the ACT may meet that as well in the future. But currently at this time, our understanding is that there's only one state that is opting to do the ACT for their state assessment, and there are more than 20, is that right, doing Smarter Balanced. So we would currently, we think a nice mix would be either Parker Smarter Balanced, in addition ACT college's entrance exam and the 11th grade.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, I want to call Michael Donnelly, HSCDA, Homeschool Legal Defense. He is here from Virginia. And welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, honorable members of the committee. Thank you for your time, your generous time this afternoon, and your patience. My name is Mike Donnelly. I'm a staff attorney for Michigan Affairs and also Director for International Relations at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I'm an adjunct professor of government at Patrick Henry College, where I teach constitutional law. HSLDA is a nonprofit advocacy organization, global in nature, dedicated to defending the rights of parents and families to homeschool. We represent the interests of several 100,000 individuals around the world, with very close to 10,000 individuals in Michigan. I won't talk about homeschooling other than to say that Michigan's a great place to homeschool. Thank you for that. The freedom that families have here in Michigan is one of the secret ingredients to homeschooling success, which credible research has shown produces excellent academic results. There's three things when you look at education that help children learn. A lot of studies have indicated and demonstrated this: high levels of academic achievement, parental involvement, and environmental stability. And I think those three things, when you look at the homeschooling environment, help explain why homeschool kids score 20 to 30 points higher on standardized academic achievement tests. This is one of the primary motivations that we have for getting involved in opposing Common Core and its system, which includes the SBAC and PARCC assessments. We're concerned that this attempt to standardize the educational process around the country and further federalize education in our country is of grave concern. We're concerned that this system, permeated by a Common Core, will naturally and over time create difficult hurdles for our constituents, for homeschoolers, that they will face directly in the college entrance area as well as in workforce access. But we care more than just about ourselves and our parochial interests, if you will. We're concerned about our community and our country, and we're concerned that a Common Core and SBAC assessment approach will be harmful to both of those. I'd also like to just point out here at the beginning that a startling development. I don't think I've ever known our organization to be on the same side of an issue as the New York State Teachers Union, which recently withdrew its support unanimously for the Common Core. And I think that data point alone ought to give you as public policymakers a moment of pause to consider what's going on when homeschoolers and teachers unions are on the same side of an issue like this regarding education. But you're here today to talk about the SBC, whether you should adopt the SBAC assessment or retain the MEAP or the ACT Aspire. And I would note that in spite of significant opposition recently, you passed the resolution to move forward with Common Core. I just want to, I'll skip forward in the interest of time on that point. And while you may not be able to repeal Common Core, which is something that our association advocates, along with many other advocacy organizations around the country, you're going to continue to hear about this issue. People are just beginning to get an awareness about Common Core, what it is, what it means, and it's not going to go away. Yes, there are reasonable, intelligent people on both sides. You've heard from many of them. And one of the tensions you face as policymakers is a responsibility to oversee the education system in Michigan. And of course, as policymakers and leaders, we want to make informed decisions. We want to have data. So I understand the appeal of the data collection and assessment strategies proposed by SBAC and Common Core. The assessments provide, as was just mentioned a moment ago, a way for states to compare themselves to each other. And of course, who doesn't like to know how you're stacking up? You can point to Michigan if you do well on the Common Core. Say, hey, look, we're better than Indiana. Don't go there, come here. I get that. But there's a tension. The tension is this. Children are not widgets. Children are not cars. And although I would say schools today, and I went to the public school, I'm a graduate of the public school system, schools today seem more like factories, making them more like factories and treating children and teachers as workers on the assembly line and raw materials misses the larger point about what education is, who's responsible for it, and what its purpose ought to be. Just to be clear, am I saying that this is what the Common Core does? Treat children like raw materials and teachers like assembly line workers, where the SBAC or the Park assessment is just a quality control check on a car? Yes. You're charged with this fiduciary duty of overseeing the expenditure of billions of taxpayer dollars on education. But standards like SBAC are mere quality assurance checklists. They come at the end of the factory process. People talk about adaptive testing, they talk about college and career ready standards, they talk about accountability and assessing teacher and student performance based on these assessments. They talk about involving teachers and parents. But how much input have teachers and parents had in the development of these assessments? Not much. I suppose that's to be expected because how can you develop an assessment process like this with a bunch of people, with too many people? It's difficult, it would bog down the process. But at the end of the day, who's responsible for directing the education and upbringing of their children? Is it a consortium or parents? Michigan leaders, elected officials, or unaccountable bureaucrats? The Common Core with this approach is if you select the SBAC, you're moving accountability away from Michigan. You're moving into the hands of unaccountable bureaucrats. You're moving the parental involvement away from Michigan. There's been some discussion about how the assessment drives curriculum and content. One of the primary faults of the consortium-driven assessment approach is that it takes effective power away from parents and local governments to have more input into what's tested, which ultimately drives content and curriculum. I talked about education. Michigan's the proud home of the automotive industry. But I know you don't want to treat children like cars, teachers like line workers, or parents like shareholders. I would suggest that a goal of education is something that you should debate as an organization, as a group. I would say that the goal of education is to empower and encourage individuals to attain their highest level of human flourishing. That sounds kind of soft and philosophical, but really, isn't that what education is about? Treating individuals like individuals, treating children like individuals. When you impose an SBAC-type system on children, you are killing the creativity that empower teachers to do that and to treat children like individuals, and you're undermining their individuality. You're treating teachers like assembly line workers, children like raw materials, schools like factories. I know you don't want to do that. I've been to Helsinki, Finland. Some people have probably heard about that. I've talked with the former Director General of the Educational Board there. His name is Timo Lankinen. And Finland is one of those countries at the very top in international assessments. They've adopted an intentional policy of decentralization and parental involvement. They intentionally do not rank teachers according to the standardized achievement successes of their students. They say this is one of the secrets of their success. When you unlock the creative human potential of individual teachers and create a love of learning in children, you create a powerful combination that yields those kinds of results. That's what makes homeschooling so effective. This can only be cultivated by teachers who can teach as individuals and treat children as individuals, and parents who are truly involved. If you continue down the path of Common Core, of centralization, of federalization, you will crush the ability and the spirit of teachers, parents, and children to do just that. And if you do that, I fear you condemn Michigan families to a gloomy educational future. I would suggest that going down that path of SBAC and Common Core is the wrong step. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. See no questions?
Thank you
for making the trip. We still have 14 more to go and 30 minutes to do it, so I'd like to call up Naomi Norman, General Education Leadership Network, She submitted testimony, so if you can please join us and please be brief. You say you need 5 minutes here, but if you can speed it up a bit, the members do have your written testimony.
Thank you for
And it doesn't say if you're in support, opposed, or neutral.
It does say, or it doesn't?
Does not.
I'm representing the General Education Leadership Network, GELN. We are a group of instructional leaders who work at intermediate school districts in Michigan. So we represent every intermediate school district, all counties in Michigan. And we are the group of leaders who work very closely with teachers in our local districts in terms of helping them implement school improvement practices, professional development, and we support their efforts in improving the quality of education here in Michigan. We have formed a group because we see the important and urgent needs to improve Michigan's education. We have a long way to go, and we want to continue to work together to do that and to learn from one another on different parts of the state. So we felt, as we watched this debate, that it was really critical that we outline for you the 4 really core components of a strong education system and explain the conditions that we think matter most when you're making a decision, particularly around an assessment system. So that's what the document that you received, it outlines those conditions. The point I really want to make, though, is how important it is that we have a very, very aligned and clear system when it comes to our standards, our assessment, our curriculum, and instruction. And to that end, I want to just briefly give an example. So if we're going to clearly define a set of standards, or in this case, specific skills that we think are very important for our young people to be able to master, it's really critical that when we come to measuring whether they've gotten there, that we are accurately measuring that. And I have to give this analogy because it really helps me think about this. We are like a basketball coach. We're building and working toward that basketball game where our kids are going to perform and play really well, have the skills, the talent, the teamwork to work together. We've defined that as our end goal. And when we don't have an assessment that actually is measuring our students' ability to get into that game and play and measuring how well they play, we have not measured our standards. This is what we do when we say we have standards in one place and our assessment is not clearly measuring those standards. We do this all the time. We do it with our current assessment system because we're still young and being skilled at doing assessment. We often also, we don't use the act of having kids get out there and demonstrate those skills. Those skills, especially when you're talking about things like the critical thinking skills and the high level of communication skills. Again, it's like going to the basketball game and instead of getting out on the court, the referee says, just sit down, tell us what you know about the game of basketball. We have to have assessments that allow our kids to get out there and show us what they can do. That allows teachers, when they can see that performance and when they're aiming for that performance, to make much better and thoughtful decisions at a local level on the curriculum they're going to use and the instruction that they're going to use with students. I also want to make the point that along the way with an assessment system, it is not just this final assessment that matters. It's the careful, it's the scrimmages that you do, if to make that basketball analogy. You get out there, you practice, you do the scrimmage. It's not for a score on your school's record. You're doing it to see how the kids play in the game. So if you have that final assessment, which is that game time game, you need to back up and have really strong opportunities for formative assessment, opportunities for kids to show what they're doing along the way. So we need to also be thinking about how our assessments, that state assessments, back up into the assessments we're using in our school systems to prepare us, and then back up into all the day-to-day work that teachers are doing to measure how kids are learning. So I wanted to just make the point, our group wrote this document to help you understand, we hope, and to be thinking about these core conditions. We recognize that this backbone is essential and that it can greatly influence the success of students in Michigan. We did not include a specific assessment in our statement. That is something we're still very carefully working on, and as a group we'll be discussing and coming out with a position next week. I want to thank you for your time.
We'll be looking forward to getting that from you when you get it completed, your recommendation on that assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to call up Stephanie Hoffaker, Olivia, and Isabel, homeschoolers in Lapeer City. It says 3 to 3.5 minutes and 1 minute each, so if you could kind of work through it because we want to get through these cards. So.
Yes, I drove three hours to be here, so I will try to do this.
Just hit the red button and you can start talking whenever you're ready. Welcome.
My name is Olivia Huffaker. I am 14 and have been a full-time homeschooler my entire life. I am concerned that Common Core and SBAC would make it harder for me to get into college or get a job or get scholarships. Common Core takes away our liberty regarding education. Why do we want to change? Why do we need to change? Who said Common Core is the way to go? When did Common Core become the new educational fashion? I'm concerned that Common Core is not better than what we have now. Common Core is a way for the federal government to slowly pick away at our freedom. Why do you want us to be common? I thought being different was a sign that you are your own person, which means you don't have to do what everybody else does. Why not just wait it out to see how it's going for the other states and then start talking about it? Shouldn't Michigan parents make decisions for Michigan kids? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Isabel Huffaker. I am 11 and I have been homeschooling my entire life. A couple of months ago, I saw a sheet of paper with Common Core math questions and answers. They were simple addition and subtraction questions that I could easily do in my head. Then I looked at the answer. Why was it so complicated? They went around the question. They took the long way and made it so complicated. Are all Common Core tests like this? Are they trying to make us less smart? Here's an example of another question I found last night on Common Core State Standards Initiative website. 13 minus 4 equals 13 minus 3 minus 1 equals 10 minus 1 equals 9. What's wrong with just saying 13 minus 4 equals 9? Then after Common Core takes over all of public schooling, we homeschoolers are next. We will lose all of our freedom of our education. Please don't let Common Core and its federal tests take over in Michigan. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
The hard acts to follow. The hard acts to follow. And they wrote those all by themselves. Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Huffaker. I am a mother of 6 children, and I'm a homeschooler of 18 years, but I've also used the public school as a tool for 2 of those children during their high school years. 10 other mothers were coming with me today, but chose not to because of the weather. I'm still debating on whether or not they were wiser than me. It was a terrible, treacherous drive this morning. This is my 3rd time testifying against Common Core. The first time I spoke regarding the questionable beginning of this process with a bait and switch back in 2010. Remember that chance to possibly win race to the top funds that turned quietly into forfeiting our constitutional state right to control our curriculum by adopting standards that weren't even written yet? The second time I came, I spoke more to the questionable content that is without any ounce of research, study, or statistics to back it up, and how my husband, a physician, would go to jail for prescribing any treatment plan that was without years and years of research and study. I still have not seen any research because, of course, there isn't any. After the hearings in October, there was a clause added to the resolution that stated homeschoolers were exempt from Common Core. I appreciate that. But we all know that there is no legal binding to that resolution. I am afraid that the inclusion of that phrase was for some just an attempt, if I can quote Representative Kelly, to marginalize the naysayers. But alas, I am here again. Today, I would like to make a few comments to you as fellow parents and as lawmakers. As parents, I think and hope that we share the belief that no one loves our kids as much as we do their parents, and no one knows them and what they individually need as much as we do. It is bad enough that when there is a problem in the school setting, we can't just fix it as the parent. We want to fix it. But no, we need to go through the teachers and the principals and maybe the school board members. But where do we go if we don't agree with the results of one of these federally controlled tests? Washington, D.C.? And what if we make a big stink about something in the curriculum? What happens? Do we get audited by the IRS? Some may chuckle at that, but seriously, it is my opinion that Common Core is just Obamacare, the twin sister of Obamacare, and that Obamacare is giving us a pretty good picture right now of what we get when federal government is in charge of anything. We all know that the moneylender controls everything. If the federal government is funding all the testing for all Michigan public school children, and testing, of course, dictates the curriculum, which, of course, dictates the class lessons, the federal government is controlling what your kids are learning. Currently, it is just public schools, but the desire is for all students everywhere to be doing things in common. That means that the educational freedom of all private schools, all charter schools, and all homeschoolers is hugely threatened. If everyone has to do the same thing, there are no options left for your families and for your children if one of them needs something different. Lastly, as legislators, your job is to represent the people. Your vote last fall to pass the resolution to continue funding Common Core was, in my opinion, very disappointing, and if not, downright shameful. Just a voice vote where there's no record? How are you representing us if we can't even tell what your vote was? Senator Richardville said there was no need for a roll call vote. Attendance here today would suggest otherwise. In closing, there are very few proponents that can say anything concrete and positive besides the catchphrase of college and career readiness in the 21st century global economy. So why is this still moving forward here in Michigan? The current momentum is actually starting to move away from Common Core, now with 8 or 9 states saying no. I am concerned that there is a lot of deal-making going on behind closed doors to get this system fully implemented here in Michigan. I appeal to your sense of honor and responsibility as a parent to do what is best for your children and my children and future generations. I appeal to your sense of honor and responsibility as a Michigan lawmaker to protect our state right to control our education and to do it in a transparent way. Please say no to federal testing and keep Washington, D.C. out of Michigan. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for making the trip. Appreciate it. Okay, Bonjay Kozak, Common Core. Look, I just want to make sure that we're clear about what this committee is doing today. We're not debating the merits of the Common Core, particularly focused on the assessment piece of it. I know that there's a relationship between the two, but with 20 minutes left and 10 cards, if you're still here, please come up and keep your comments based on the assessment piece. Not here? We'll keep going through the list. Sarah Perks, representing herself and her family. Wishing to speak, opposes, a couple minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My printer and my computer decided to stop talking to one another, so this is going to be a bit extemporaneous. So, first, let's start with what is education supposed to be for? What's the purpose? Is it for college and career, or is it to educate the whole human being for life? I personally care more about my children being well-rounded human beings than ready to enter the workforce. The State Balanced, or the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium is not a Michigan test. We do not have control over the tests. Yes, as we can pick certain ones from a bank, but those are voted on majority rule by the members of the consortium, and the federal government does. The U.S. Department of Education is reviewing the tests to determine whether or not they meet their criteria, since a lot of this is tied to No Child Left Behind waivers. So at the end of the day, we are signing over our rights as Michigan parents and legislators to determine what and how our children are going to be tested if we follow through with this. Real quick, with regards to the ACT Aspire, I'm not as familiar with the ACT Aspire as I am the Smarter Balanced Assessment, but I do know that it was developed with Pearson, who, along with the Gates Foundation, is one of the biggest financial backers of the development of the Common Core state standards, and Pearson, being one of actually the largest textbook publisher in the entire world, stands to make a whole lot of money on all of this. And especially if people start signing on to the Aspire, well, let's buy the Pearson textbooks that then will go along with the Pearson and the ACT Aspire smart, standardized tests that everyone's going to be taking. So I would certainly consider looking into that as just a motive. As far as measuring student growth, do we really need standardized assessments to tell our teachers and our parents whether or not their children are learning what they need to learn? I can tell if my child is able to read better now than she was 4 months ago. I can tell if my child has learned more math skills than she knew at the beginning of the year. Don't we give out assignments and grades and regular classroom tests to determine whether or not they're learning the material that we're teaching them? So if a teacher needs a standardized test to be given a few times a year to determine whether or not her students are learning the material she's teaching, or he, I would wager they're not really probably a very good teacher. Let's see. Also, with regards to the Smarter Balanced Assessment, New York has started implementing these tests, and we have seen so many children with wetting themselves, losing control of their bowels, vomiting, crying, begging, please don't send me back to school, I can't take that test. And there are psychologists that have testified, childhood psychologists that have testified that these tests are actually damaging for young children. And so that, again, is something I would certainly consider. And teacher evaluations being tied to these tests does most definitely drive the curriculum. If a teacher knows that they are going to keep or lose their job based on their students' performance on these tests, they are going to make sure that they are teaching to that test. And so while, yes, the Common Core is not curriculum, it's just standards. The standards set the tests drive curriculum. So I implore all of you as parents, legislators, Michigan citizens, to think about your own children, your own grandchildren, your neighbors' children, and consider whether or not you want the federal government deciding what and how your children are going to be learning, and whether or not you would prefer for your children to be creative and ingenuitive and develop things like the iPod, or be good workers who can put them together really well in a factory. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. Is Jody Brown still here? Wishing to speak for 1 minute. Kathy White from the Michigan Assessment Consortium. Kathy's still here. Kathy did submit written testimony. And we've only got about 8 minutes left, so if you could please get started.
Hello. Thanks to those of you that have remained with us. My name is Kathy Dewsbury White, and I'm the president of the Michigan Assessment Consortium. The Michigan Assessment Consortium is a statewide collaborative group of professional educators who work together to improve student learning and achievement through a system of coherent curriculum, balanced assessment, and effective instruction. And I do appreciate the opportunity to address the committee, and my remarks are brief. The consortium believes that there are 8 principles that lead to the development of an effective state assessment system. And these 8 principles basically center around 4 characteristics, and I'm going to run through them quickly. The first is purpose. So tests are built for specific purposes. And if the results of a test are used for things that it was not designed for, the validity of that use is brought into question. So evidence has to be gathered and evaluated for each proposed use of a test. The second characteristic is balanced. So a well-crafted assessment system will employ summative and interim assessments as well as formative assessment practices as appropriate. Emphasis on the word practices, not tiny little tests or item bank selections. It's the practice in the classroom that the teacher engages in. The balance in testing modality allows for all relevant stakeholders to receive appropriate assessment information when the system's balanced. The third characteristic that's important to a state assessment system is alignment. So the learning targets assessed have to match the relevant curriculum targets, both in terms of content and cognitive complexity. And you've heard a lot about that because you do have standards that are more demanding. And you're looking for a test that will help you know whether or not the cognitive complexity is happening for the kids in the state of Michigan, if they're mastering it. The fourth characteristic I'd like to raise is professional development. So as an assessment takes a more prominent place in our classrooms than it has with more accountability, educators need additional assessment tools, and many of these additional tools relate to formative assessment structures and in training. So there are a few additional issues that you're grappling with and that you asked the department to deal with also as you're looking at which assessment. These additional issues that the department is tasked with providing leadership and stewardship around have to do with adopting and administrating a statewide student assessment system. And at present, these issues they're centering on data access and ownership, Michigan's involvement in the development process, and the content of the state assessment, and the use and availability of technology to produce and provide a computer adaptive test. And you've heard some discussion about what's a computer adaptive test do, so I won't get into that. I do want to direct you to something. On our website, we have a set of assessment literacy standards, and we've made them for policymakers, for administrators, for educators, and for students, because it's really tough when you find yourself in the midst of having to grapple with all the decisions that you've been dealing with to not have that basis and that foundation. And it's made this work, I think, very, very difficult and complex. So if you take those 4 characteristics that speak to the principles that are the foundation of an effective statewide student assessment system, and you take those additional issues of data access and ownership and Michigan's involvement in development and the appropriate use of available technology, the Michigan Assessment Consortium believes that at the current time the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium provides the best option for use within the state testing system for Michigan. So we're hoping that you will follow the recommendation of the department and adopt the Smarter Balanced Assessments as they are offered presently, and do the due diligence that we need to commit to in terms of seeing are these going to work as they are purported, you know. So.
Okay. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for being patient, Kathy. Next, I'd like to call up Paulette Brack, Home Education League.
Yes.
Senator Young.
I don't have a question for you. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, or to the chair, honorable chairs, I just have a simple question. Is there some sort of end game with this committee in terms of like a policy action that we might take up? Or is this just evaluation? Because from what I'm hearing, it's just a lot of we don't really like Smarter Balance, and since they already have the contract, I mean, from my mind, I'm only kind of thinking this is going to go like either one or two ways. Either we're going to take over the RFP process, which I would totally be against from a legislative standpoint, or we're going to talk about defunding this program, which if that's the case, then I have like some real concerns, because I'm not saying that the people who are here who are opposed to Common Core and who are homeschooling their kids aren't having legitimate concerns. I'm not trying to bash them. I'm sure they're great and they're doing a great job with their children. I'll just say, from my standpoint within DPS, we are so damaged from a financial and academic standpoint that not being able to have an assessment process, that's just not going to get done. Right. And so if that's the case, I at least would like to have some time in advance to go tell my community this is going to happen.
No, this committee was set up to examine and explore the 11 types of tests that are out there.
So it's just
We're
examination.
working our way through there. It's an examination.
Okay,
It's
all right.
Fact-finding issue.
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Paulette?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you can hear me, I take it.
That's good.
Paulette Brock, Home Education League of Michigan. I'm going to be really quick. We're concerned about privacy issues. The built-in collection of massive amounts of data on students will be used in undetermined ways. The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, the Department of Education in 2013 unilaterally altered that so that any government or private entity that the department says is evaluating an education program would then have access to students' personal, identifiable information without parental notification. We feel that's a big violation. 2, choice and freedom. We're very much in favor of choice and freedom, very concerned about a centralized, top-down approach to education. We happen to feel teachers are very talented. They're closest in the classroom to their students. We're also concerned about the effects this would have on private education as well as homeschooling. Last thing, local control. The SBAC tests would basically, in our opinion, ruin the education process by removing the local control. Education is best kept closest to the parents and at the local and state levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tiffany Doolittle, representing herself and her family, wishing to speak for a minute or two. Poses. And as you're getting set up, Kim Winter turned in a call from the Information Network for Christians, not wishing to speak, opposes the bill. Mike Winter from Inch opposes the bill. And Tina DuPont opposes, not wishing to speak. Thank you. Tiffany?
Hi, everybody. Can you turn it on?
Yeah, just hit the red button.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak and oppose Michigan's proposed state assessment and assessment options. My name is Tiffany Doolittle. I'm a college-educated, now homeschooling mom of one wonderful daughter. I pulled her out of school in 6th grade. She tested wonderfully on the MEPS. She was highest level of testing. I feel like the school system failed me. When she was in the school, we really tried to provide her with extra educational materials, extra opportunities to learn, and we were told that she had to fulfill the grade level expectations and do the grade level work. We invested in some homeschooling materials. We sent that into the school, tried to get the teachers to work with us to do that. Because she tested so well, they knew that she could do the work, but she still had to do what was expected of her in that grade. So we made the option to pull her out and homeschool her. 2 years later, so this was 2 years ago, 2 years later,
She would be at a public school 8th grade level. She's at a 10th grade level. That's the reason why I came. Recently, I met a woman from China. She is in the MSU higher education program there. And I spoke with her regarding higher education in China and what that's like. She was very honest and open about how things went in China. She said that the children were tested all along, that they were found, their gifts and talents and their abilities were found, and they were plugged into certain areas of like career tracks almost for the higher learning, college ready, career ready track. I asked her, I said, when you came to the United States, she had been here for about 4 months, I said, what do you find are the qualities of the people that you've met? What's your general impression from the time that you got here? And she said, I'm really surprised because people here are happy. They have lower stress levels. They seem to enjoy the work that they do. What is it that we want? What is it that we want? Do we want kids tested, stressed? Do we want their performance measured? Or do we want children to love to learn? This is the first time I've ever done this.
You're doing
and
fine.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time here because I'm passionate about this. Do we want our children to pursue goals and interests as individuals and dream big dreams? Or do we want to globally compete? And I agree that we need to globally compete, but when you're holding your children back that are testing at a very high level and making them do age-specific things, is that what we want? Do we want to be like China? Or do we want to be different? Do we want to be like the great experiment that our country was founded on? That was truly a great experiment, and I feel like our children are going through an experiment that may not be so great. Thomas Edison would not have passed the SBAC. He would have failed, probably. I'm just praying that Thomas Edison's light shines on the sure issue of the smarter balanced assessments. As I'm aware, 13 states have opted out of this, and I hope Michigan follows suit. That's all. Thank you for my time.
Tiffany, thank you for coming in. Jane Polly. Is Jane still here? Looking for a minute or two, and then if Maggie Asseltine is here, she will be coming up next. And we've got just a couple minutes. We've got to close this down. So.
Hello. I've never done this before either, so please excuse my nervousness. My name is Jane Polly, and I'm here with my husband and my sons, who are students in the public school system. Today they are on a very important field trip. I'm here because of them. I am concerned about committing to the Smarter Balance testing in particular because I'm concerned about the amount of time my children will be testing. I am concerned that we are putting so much emphasis on computer adaptive tests and excluding other ways that students demonstrate progress and proficiency. Teachers and parents are truly the best able to judge the students' progress. And as my son would say, I am a human being and not a statistic. I am not common. Thank you.
Thank you. Margot, welcome. And then Karen Braun will be next. She's gone.